Welcome to this presentation on applying systems thinking to the Ten Commandments. This is an example of the thought process. It began when I noticed this representation of the Ten Commandments on the tablet. I'm Jewish and I have been seeing this representation over the years, and I've always thought to myself, there aren't 10 there. Because the first one, Anochi, I am the Lord thy God, is not a commandment, it's just a statement of fact. And then, more recently, when I saw this representation on tablets, I saw here are 10 commandments. And I started thinking about them. Why are there differences in the tablets? And how many commandments are there? So, having developed the tool for applying systems thinking, I thought I would use it on the 10 Commandments, and I'm sharing it with you. Before I share it with you, let me just point out this difference. On the one with the Hebrew, it says, I am the Lord thy God, and this one, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, is left out of the Hebrew one. Interesting. Okay. These are the holistic thinking perspectives that I'm going to apply. If you're not sure or don't know what they are, look them up in my other presentation on why you should be using systems thinking to solve problems. So, looking at or perceiving the 10 Commandments from the big picture, and using the Kipling questions, who, what, where, when, why, and how. A few of the questions and the answers are, who gave the commandments to whom? God gave them to the children of Israel. What are they? There's some of the commandments that are listed in the 5 books of Moses. Traditionally, there are 613 commandments, so we have a subset of 10. Where are they located? They're located once in Exodus, as we read the story of the Exodus, and the story tells us in real time. And then in Deuteronomy, when Moses is summarizing everything before he's about to die. So we have 2 versions of the 10 Commandments. Where were they given? In Mount Sinai, as I just said. When were they given? That's after the Exodus from Egypt, round about 3,000 plus years ago. Why were they given? It's not relevant to the number. How were they given? Verbally and written on stone tablets. And how do we know there are 10 of them? Well, that is written in Exodus 34, verse 28, and it's written in Deuteronomy twice, once in chapter 4 and once in chapter 10. You can look up the references yourself. So, before we talk about the commandments, let's make sure we're on the same page. A commandment is an instruction to do or not to do something. So it's a sentence containing an imperative verb. Thou shalt, honor, remember, etc. And we also have or and not are implied instructions. Actually, that should be nor. How about that? Or and nor are implied instructions, so there are multiple commandments in the sentence, and commandments are known as requirements in engineering. Back here. So now let's go through each of them one by one in detail. And I've put in every single verse in the Exodus version so that you can, and I can, make sure that we haven't left anything out. So the first verse is not a commandment, it's a background instruction. The second verse, as I pointed out earlier, is not a commandment, it's a statement. So the first commandment is, thou shalt have no other gods before me. That is the first commandment over here, and there's a running total of 1. Next commandment, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness or. 4 commandments. Total number is 5. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. 2 commandments. Total number 7. Hey, this is good. Verse 6 is not a commandment, it's context. So verse 7, thou shalt not take the name of thy God in vain. That's a commandment. And remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. And in Deuteronomy, it says, keep the Sabbath day to sanctify it. Remember and keep are different commandments. They ask you to do 2 different things. On the other hand, as I'll discuss later, they may be ways of keeping the Sabbath holy and sanctifying it. But then shouldn't it say, sanctify the Sabbath or keep the Sabbath holy? So we're counting those as 2, and that gives us 10 commandments. All right, are we done? No, wait a minute. How about this one? 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. That's a commandment. But in the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not work, and a list of people who shalt not work. So we're up to 12 commandments. But notice this one, 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. Have you ever heard that mentioned? In all the time I have been to synagogue, in Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox, conservative, and progressive, and Reform, I've never heard anybody mention that one. And I have no idea what it's like in Christianity. So we're up to 12 commandments. Keep going. For in verse 11 is again background. Verse 12 is honor thy father and thy mother. That's a commandment. Verse 13, thou shalt not kill. So now we're up to 14. Keep going. Thou shalt not commit adultery. That's another commandment. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness. So we're now up to 17. Now look at this one. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house. Thou shalt not, nor. We've got 7 commandments in that sentence, so we're up to 24. So how did 10 end up as 24? Well, think about what we do in systems engineering. There are 2 different types of commandments, structural continuum perspective. So we have the 10 commandments, and then each one is listed, and I can show that, and here is a part of the hierarchy. And then I'll go down to Exodus 20, verse 17. It says, thou shalt not covet anything. And then the other ones are examples. So we can say that neighbor's house, neighbor's wife, neighbor's ox, neighbor's ass, and so on are examples of what thou shalt not covet. So when it says thou shalt not covet anything, that's what to do. And not coveting a house, not coveting a wife, not coveting an ox or an ass, are how you shall not covet. With me? So we can now start reducing the number of commandments, because we'll say we'll only count the what level or system level commandments. So we can go back to thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or likeness and say, all right, that's 1 commandment. And so we can break that up into a commandment and 3 subcommandments. Thou shalt not covet, as I just mentioned. The commandment is right there at the end, anything that is thy neighbor's, and these are subcommands from it. So instead of so we can take out 9 from the 24, and that gets us down to 15. Okay, where else can we take out? Well, how about back at the beginning in verse 3? We've got, thou shalt have no other gods before me. And then the 2 commandments that follow, we can consider that those are ways of how we shall not have other gods before God. by not making graven images, likenesses, and so on, not bowing down and not serving them. So we can take out 6. All right, we've got to 9. Oh. I thought the number was 10. So this is the part of the talk where I usually say, any questions to the audience? But I'm turning that around now, and I'm going to give the audience some questions. How many commandments are there? What are they? And why is 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work totally ignored? So does the 5-day working week transgress this commandment? Should we at least do some work on the 6th day? And while the temple priests were exempted from working on the Sabbath because they were commanded to bring the sacrifices in the temple, where's the written commandment or exemption for today's clergy to do God's work on the Sabbath because they are outside the temple? And if there isn't such an exemption, why are they actually working on the Sabbath in transgression of the commandment? I leave these questions to you. Why don't you ask your local rabbi or the equivalent in Christianity and see what kind of an answer you get? You never know. You might get an answer, or you might get into trouble.